Thank you. I don't say that enough, but thank you. I'm glad to see you. I'm glad that you're here. It's hard to believe that it was just 3 years ago, in March of 2020, that this room was empty. And I was talking to that camera for what was supposed to be 3 weeks to flatten the curve. We know how that went. But for months, this room was empty. And then for months after that, people tried to make their way back. And then for the better course of the last almost 3 years, we've been trying to figure out what does life look like after our rhythms were destroyed, after our habits were deconstructed. And you could say that we've spent the last year just starting over. And I thank you for hanging in there. And I thank you for carving out the time. I will never take it for granted to see you here. I know you make a choice in the busyness of your life, and among all of the things that you could do, you decide to come. Now, there was a blessing during those years when this building was empty because God worked in mysterious ways. And I heard from people all across the country, people who went to churches who didn't have the ability to live stream, who found us online, who became Riverbenders at a distance. People from all over the country emailed me. I got emails from Great Britain and from Ireland and from France and from Europe and people who discovered Riverbend in that season of isolation. And I'm thankful for that, but it's nothing like being together. Nothing like being here. And I'm so looking forward to the weeks and the months ahead, especially to this season, the celebration of the resurrection. And we've been seeing more and more people find their way back to Riverbend on Sundays, and I'm looking forward to what is classically here, the largest Sunday of the year. And given those parameters that were at least 20% above where we were a year ago in the numbers of folks who are showing up, we're anticipating that Good Friday and Easter will be an amazing gathering of our community of faith. That's why we've moved the Good Friday service out of the chapel, which we've done for the last 10 years. It won't grow. We already do 7 services. So Carlton and the team have come up with a way to make it feel intimate in this room. And so at 8 o'clock on Good Friday, we're going to come together to experience the memory of that day. And then on Easter Sunday, we're going to have 3 services at weird times, 8:30, 10 o'clock, and 11:30. And I'm asking all of you who are here now to come early. Come at 8:30, because the folks who are just finding their way here once in a while will come at 10 and 11:30. So please come early and make room for them later. And I'm looking forward to that weekend in just a few weeks. But on the journey there, I want us to enter into the Easter season by asking one question. The question is this: why is it hard to believe? I mean, don't we just choose to believe? Isn't belief a very simple thing? Why is it hard for us to believe that there is a God that loves us? Why is it hard to believe that there are better days ahead for us? Why is it hard to believe in hope? Why is it hard to believe in love? Why is it a struggle? Because the thing I am convinced of, it's a struggle for all of us. I like to think that if Jesus was actually here, if the actual Jesus was here in the flesh, that it wouldn't be hard for us to believe. That we'd see him, we'd hear him, he could touch us, he could embrace us, we could know him, we could interact with him, we could ask him all the hard questions. And I like to think that if he were here, we could all believe it wouldn't be that hard. But the evidence suggests that that's not true. And on the weeks leading up to Easter, one of the things that we want to do is we want to be honest about the struggle. That's what these stories about. Every week we've had some opportunity to hear from Riverbenders who have been in the dark, in the deep, who know what it is to wrestle with their faith. And we'll hear from their stories. And Urban artists are going to write songs like you heard today, original music to go with each of those stories. So I'm looking forward to that journey, but I'm also looking forward to the study of the people who were with Jesus who struggled like we do. I want to look at a handful of people who were there. They saw him, they heard him, they got to reach out and touch him, and they still found it hard to believe. And so today I want to begin that journey by looking at the story of a man named Nathanael. We meet Nathanael right at the front end of the gospel story in John chapter 1. In John chapter 1, down in verse 43, we meet a man named Philip. And Philip was called to be a disciple by Jesus. Jesus simply said, "Come follow me." And Philip did. It wasn't hard for him to believe. He just picked up and went. Now, maybe it was because he knew Peter and Andrew. We don't know for sure. But the next thing that he did was he went to tell his friend Nathanael. And he found Nathanael and he said, "We have found the one we have been looking for. We have found the one that Moses and the prophets told us was coming. We found the promised Messiah, and his name is Jesus, and he's the son of Joseph of Nazareth." And Nathanael says, "Nazareth? Can any good thing possibly come out of Nazareth?" And Nathanael found it hard to believe that this was, in fact, the Savior. And he found it hard to believe for the same reason that many of us do. It's because we have a closed mind. It is because we choose not to believe before we even consider the possibility that we could. How does this happen? How does this happen? How do we get to a point where we decide before we even think about it that we will not believe? And how do we hold on to that? And what do we do about it? Today I want to look at the experience that Nathanael had and the experience that all of us have. And the problem we have with believing because we have decided not to. We have closed our mind to faith. But before we talk about that, would you pray with me for a moment? Father in heaven, I would ask that the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart would be pleasing in your sight, that you would use your word spoken by your servant and anointed by your Spirit to challenge us to choose to believe. In that simple choice, may we set ourselves free and find peace. I pray that for myself and for my family and for anyone who might hear this message. For I ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. We may not realize it, but we are at war. And you may say, well, yeah, of course, there's conflicts in the world, and there's geopolitical wars, and there's military conflicts, and there's conflicts over territory in the world. We live in a world at war, and the Bible backs us up. The Bible reminds us that as long as there are human beings on this planet, there will be wars and rumors of war. And if you think about it in a broader sense, we are at war because we are in a culture war. We are in a war of ideas, an ideological, a philosophical war. And for those of you who are so inclined, you realize that we live in the middle of a spiritual warfare. But what you may not realize is that this war does not take place on foreign soil. This war does not take place beyond our experience. This war begins in us, that we are at war with ourselves. And the reason that it's hard for us to believe is because there is part of us that does not want to believe and part of us that craves it. And in this conflict, there are battle lines. And the battle lines in this war are the battle line of our mind, the battle line of our will or our bodies, and the battle line of our spirit or our heart, and our soul. And the battle line for our mind is where we often fight this idea of what does it mean to believe. And the antagonists of how we think about faith are the antagonists of dogma and becoming dogmatic. Now, I could say that the antagonist of faith in thinking about faith is our prejudice, our bigotry, our predispositions. But we're all prejudiced, all of us. None of us is without prejudice. Some of us like vanilla, some of us like chocolate, some of us like Texas A&M, some of us like UT, some of us like Chevrolet, some of us like Ford. Some of us are happy, some of us are sad. We have predispositions and inclinations and prejudices. None of us is free of a measure of a certain kind of bigotry and preference and prejudice. But that's not dogma. Dogma is safe for us because dogma is a thinking that says it's above question. It's beyond question. It is beyond a doubt. And things become dogmatic, and people become dogmatic when it becomes inappropriate to even interrogate what you think or what you believe or what your prejudices are. And dogma is dangerous. You see, dogma is that place where we enter into a thinking that what I know is enough. And what I believe is the only thing that is right. And we push it into a place where we can't even interrogate it or dismantle it or question it. This is what happened in the story with Philip and Nathanael. In John chapter 1 and verse 43, it tells us that Philip was called by Jesus. Jesus saw him and he said, "Come follow me." And Philip did. Oh, we don't know why. We have no idea. It doesn't even explain it. Jesus said, "Come follow me." And Philip said, "Okay." Now, it may have been that he heard from Peter and Andrew. He was friends with them. They were from the town of Bethsaida. And maybe he heard from them that this Jesus guy was amazing. He was the man. We don't know. We do know exactly what Philip did. Philip went immediately to find his friend Nathanael. And when he saw Nathanael, he said, "I found the guy. We found the guy we've been looking for, the guy we've been praying for, the one that Moses and the prophets wrote about and told us about. His name is Jesus. He's the son of Joseph of Nazareth." And then we hear Nathanael's dogma. Nazareth? Can anything good come out of College Station? Can anything good come out of Oklahoma? Can anything good come out of New York City? Because he had predetermined and he had predecided that it was not possible for this to be true. Now, typically we think that we become dogmatic because of our pride, because of our ego, because of our arrogance. But I think we become dogmatic simply because we're lazy. Because we don't take the time, we don't take the energy to interrogate our beliefs. We're not willing to say, why is that true? What do you mean by that? We become intellectually lazy. And you know, the place where that happens more than anywhere else is the church. I was told as a young preacher, one of my mentors said, "Dave, one of the hardest things that you will encounter in your ministry is knowing that every Sunday afternoon, everyone is going to brunch, and what they are having for brunch is roast preacher. And that you will be on the menu and people will have opinions about your performance and your presentation." And over the years, that concerned me, but I've gotten to the point where I actually invite it. Go ahead, fill yourself up. Have at it. You know why? Because I don't want us to be a lazy church. Can we not be lazy? Can we be people who say, well, why was that? Why is that? I'll find out for myself. I will do the work. I won't simply know what time it is. I'll know why the watch works. And I'm not afraid to dismantle my faith. I'm not afraid to deconstruct it. I'm not afraid to interrogate it. Because I'm willing to take the time to investigate it for myself. Because a faith worth having is a faith worth investigating. So how do we push back against this? How do we push back against this dogmatic, this closed mind? Well, we do it by staying teachable. By admitting I don't know everything. There's more I can learn. There's more I can discover. We live in a universe that is infinitely mysterious. Explore it. Ask questions about it. Interrogate it. It's okay. In fact, it's what makes us healthy. And I think what that means is staying infinitely curious. You want to know the secret that I've learned about getting along with people who piss me off? People who I disagree with, people who I will never see eye to eye with. You know what I've learned? You know how to approach that is ask. Why do you think that? Why do you believe that? Sincerely, why? I don't understand. I don't understand why you feel that way. I don't understand why you think that way. I don't understand that attraction. I don't understand that priority. I don't understand that perspective. I seriously want to know. I'm infinitely curious. I want to know. And it's not a contest. It's not like I want to know so that I can build a more capable argument. It's not a discussion and a sort of a debate or an arm wrestling contest so I can walk away the winner. I just want to know. I just want to find out, how did you get here? What is it like to be there? I've never been there. I may never know. I may never want to know. But I stay curious, and to have a curious and a teachable mind pushes back on that conflict that wants to close my mind down. That wants to shut me down and make me dogmatic and say, I believe what I believe. Don't confuse me with the facts. And the first battle line that is drawn in this warfare that we are in is the battle for our mind, or it's also a battle for our will. And this is our body. This is our physical activities. And the antagonist to having a growth or a peaceful life is stubbornness. You know anybody who's stubborn? Anybody? Those of you who raised your hands are not stubborn. Those of you who didn't are. I want to give you a quiz. Here's a quiz. If you answer yes to this, you may be a stubborn person. There's a psychological exam to determine 5 indicators that you may be a stubborn person. If you agree with these, you may be a stubborn person. Number 1, if you keep at an idea or plan or insist on making your point even when you know you're wrong. You may be a stubborn person. Number 2, if you do something you want to do even if no one else wants to do it. My way or the highway. You may be a stubborn person. Number 3, when others present an idea, you tend to point out all the reasons it won't work. Number 4, indicator you are a stubborn person. You visibly feel anger, frustration, and impatience when others try to persuade you of something you don't agree with. You turn on the television of a news station you don't normally watch, and you start yelling at the television. You may be a stubborn person if, number 5, you agree to or commit half-heartedly to others' requests when you know all along that you're going to do something entirely different. Now, there are 2 proofs of those 5 indicators. And the first proof that you are a stubborn person is you don't think any of those applied to you. And the second conclusive proof that you are a stubborn person is that you think the person sitting next to you is the stubborn person. What causes us to be stubborn people? I think we think, well, that's pride, isn't it? That is that self-confidence, because there's an aspect of stubbornness that has value, that's worthwhile. It leads to persistence. It leads to following through. I was raised to be a stubborn person. I was raised to be a person who finished what they started. I was raised to be a person who stood on their convictions. I was raised to be stubborn. So what is the root of stubbornness? And I think the root of stubbornness is because we are afraid. I think we're often stubborn because of fear. Because we're afraid of what's around the corner. We're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of a loss of control. We're afraid of change. And so we stubbornly dig our heels in and say, I will not, I cannot, I refuse. So how do we push back against a stubborn will? How do we push back against it? And I think the answer normally would be to be courageous. Because it takes courage to push back against that inclination to be stubborn. And it takes courage to press into fear. But I think the thing that pushes back the most is when we are generous. Because generosity takes courage. It takes courage to say, I don't have everything I need, but what I can, I will give to you. I may not have extra time. I may not have extra resources. I may not have all of the skill in the world, but I have the courage to be generous. And it pushes back on that spirit of a stubborn will. And it's also the willingness to be available. And we push back on this, on the conflict, the battle line of our will, and how we spend our time and spend our resources and allocate our physical capacities. By being generous and by being available, we push back on that inclination to stubbornness and the fear of change and uncertainty and a loss of control. This is how we guard against a closed mind and a hard heart, and a stubborn will, and finally a hard heart. What causes a hard heart? I think it's because we feel entitled. You know, the three most damaging words to our heart are, I deserve better. Because it makes gratitude impossible. It makes contentment an impossibility. When we look at our lives and we say, okay, I disregard all of the things that I have that are good, and I only see what I lack or what I need, and I deserve better. It is the nature of the hardening of our heart that we feel entitled, and I think people who feel entitled feel victimized. They feel treated unfairly. And I think the reason they say that is because they are insecure. Because a person who is secure, a person who is comfortable in their own selves, doesn't worry about whether it's fair or not, or whether they're a victim or not. And it guards against, and that insecurity creates a hardness in our hearts. And how do we push back on that hardening of our hearts? It's by being humble and honest. What happened to Nathanael? After Philip says to his friend, come and see. Just give this Jesus a try. Philip and Nathanael are walking toward Jesus, and Jesus sees Nathanael. And out of the blue, he says, there is a man who is a true son of Israel. a man of complete integrity. And Nathanael says, wait a minute, how do you even know me? You don't know me. And Jesus says, yeah, but I saw you. I saw you before Philip found you when you were sitting alone under the fig tree. And it tells us that Nathanael fell at Jesus' feet and said, you are the promised one. You are the Son of God, the King of Israel. What happened there? What happened to Nathanael? Now, it's possible what happened to Nathanael in that moment was when Jesus said to him, I saw you. I saw you when you were alone, when you thought no one else saw you. Whatever you were doing under that fig tree, I saw you there. And I know who you are. I know the desire of your heart. I know you want to be a man of integrity. And in Jesus seeing him and realizing that he was known by him, he said, well, you're not the average guy. You're amazing. You have to be the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. You are the Savior of the world. I believe you. And that's possible. It's possible because of that moment. In that moment, Nathanael experienced the reality of Jesus' knowledge of him and received it. It's possible. Theologians don't like that, though. Theologians get their shorts all in a knot, and they're like, rah, rah, no, harumph. That's got to be something else. And so they dig around in the scriptures, and they find in Zechariah chapter 3, there's this obscure passage. And in Zechariah chapter 3, Zechariah records a prophecy where he is addressing what is called the branch. The root of David and the branch that comes from the root of David is a metaphor for the Messiah in much of the prophetic literature. And the word branch in Hebrew is natsar. It's from which you get the word Nazarene or Nazarite or Nazareth. And so maybe Nathanael did the math and it's like, oh, wait a minute. He is from Nazareth and the Natsar is the branch of the root of David. And the prophecy of Zechariah goes on and it says that God will make an inscription on the one stone. And the inscription will be that he will remove the sin from the nation of Israel and by implication make all of the Israelites people of complete integrity. And Jesus says, here is a true Israelite, a man of complete integrity, the same language that Zechariah uses. But the kicker is in verse 10 of Zechariah chapter 3, where he says, in that day, all of the Israelites will gather together and they will sit under their vine and their fig tree. And theologians get it, that's got to be what it is, because Zechariah knew the scriptures so well that he knew this obscure prophecy. And when Jesus said, I saw you under the fig tree, they connected the dots. And he said, you got to be the Messiah. I've studied the Bible for 50 years. And I didn't know I had Zechariah chapter 3 till I studied it this week. I mean, really? Now, it's possible. It's totally possible. That Nathanael was a man who sought God so diligently that he had an instant awareness of the details of the prophecies of God, and he was able to connect the dots between the Nazarah and the Jesus calling him a man of integrity, and that he saw him under the fig tree, and oh, you're the guy. Or maybe he said, you saw me under the fig tree and nobody saw me there. I was all by myself and I didn't know what was going on. How do you understand me? How do you know? It could have been any of those or none of those. Because it was the same for Nathanael as it is for us. He chose to believe. He chose it. The evidence was there. All he did was not close his mind to it, and he chose to believe. I know it's an oversimplification, but the reality is it's just our choice. If we are going to push back and we are going to if there's a battle raging for our heart, our will, and our spirit, and it's a battle between whether or not we're going to be dogmatic and lazy and stubborn and afraid and entitled and insecure, or we're going to be teachable and curious and generous and available and humble and honest, it's which do you choose? It's our choice. That's what it is. Now, I know it's simple, but it's not easy. I know that. It's not easy because I've got issues. I got stuff. I got pain, and I got disappointment, and I've got shame, and I've got guilt, and I've got failures, and I've got desires, I've got lusts, I've got needs. And all of these things are distracting me from finding peace. But the peace is there if you just choose it. I can't. I got too much going on. I have too much anxiety. I have too much fear. Stop it. Choose it. Faith is a choice. Peace is a choice. I know it's not a choice that you make one time and then it's over. It's a choice that we make throughout our day, every day. Every crossroads, every opportunity, we have to choose who will win the battle. But this is why faith is so hard. This is why it's hard to believe. See what Nathanael did. Nathanael's story is our story. And he was at war just like we are at war. And he was a man like we are, a person of divided affections. But how can we expect to live in a world of peace if there's no peace within us? If we're not willing to choose to come to peace? It's hard. It's hard to believe. And that's what we're going to explore in the weeks coming up to Easter. In these 5 weeks, we are going to hear stories every week, stories of the struggle. And you're going to hear original songs that the talented Riverbend community has written, and they're specifically written to express the nature of that struggle and the hope that we can find in that struggle. And I'm looking forward to that journey to Easter. I know what's ahead. I know what's coming. I know what Good Friday is going to be like in this room, and I promise you it will be a powerful experience. I promise you the stories and the songs that you will hear will be incredible. But I know you have to choose to experience it. And I'm glad that you chose to be here today. In fact, I will never take it for granted that you have a choice and that you chose to come and to be here. And I'm glad you did. I'm glad you do. I'm glad you are. And I'm glad you will. Thank you.